Good morning, Instagram live. As you can see, I'm outside today, a little bit chilly. I don't have my van or car with me today, so waiting for my son to finish his stagecoach class. So I'm out in the school, a little bit cold, but I said to myself I still want to do the Instagram live, so here I am. So if you're joining this from when it's after it's been recorded, please, if you can give it a like, a share for anybody that you think could benefit from what I'm about to discuss today, that'd be super cool. And I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds before I kick off. But whilst we're waiting, just to give a bit of an insight as to why am I doing this. So what I like to do every other Saturday is talk about, what's been sliding into my DMs over the course of the week to give you a bit of an insight to the type of conversations that I have through sales training, sales coaching, or just connecting with people on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. And you kind of get some free advice as well. But I like to give it a bit more of a relaxed pace compared to like what I'd be posting on LinkedIn and, other stories throughout my day. So yeah, this is kind of why we're down. And last time round, we had a couple of people joining in, throwing some questions into the chat. So if you've got any questions or you want to pick my brain or opinion on something, feel free to drop them down on the comments below. But it's been a cool week. It's been a relatively busy week and had quite a lot of DMs. And there's one or two that I really want to talk about today. But kicking off the first one, I had a lovely gentleman who I met last month with my sales coach, so where I'm providing them one-to-one sales coaching, and he's on what we call a scholarship. So scholars typically get 3 free sessions from a sales coach, and after the 3rd session they can continue subscribing, or if that's what all they want and that's all they get, that's totally cool as well. But met a really cool guy who was a BDR manager for a tech company, and we had our first session last month. And what I always like to do before I meet somebody is always send them a LinkedIn connection request to say, look, I'm your new sales coach, look forward to meeting you. And the reason I do this is so that they can kind of see my profile, my experience, build a bit of rapport before we join in. But when I met with this gentleman, kind of his challenges were, as a manager running a global team, how do you motivate the team? How do you get them performing? And his background was being a top performer and an individual contributor. So he was a rep himself, and now he's moved up into leadership. And as a leader, you've got to lead people and inspire them and motivate them as well. So we kind of had a few areas that he wanted to focus on, which was, I've done the work, I'm trying to tell the team to do it, and this is how I've done it. How do I get them to fall in line with that? And then we spoke about, how does he structure his weeks? How does he communicate with them? How does he have his one-to-ones, etc. But, the main one was we kicked off about onboarding. Typically, when I've been a manager or I've been a rep in companies, the way that I see onboarding is typically a 2-week process. So week 1 is, okay, here's our company, this is our product, watch a couple of videos, watch a couple of recorded, sessions and calls, and get yourself familiar with it and read a bunch of our content and use our onboarding platform or e-learning platform. And then typically you go into week 2, and that's when they give you the sales training, where they show you all the prospecting tools, all the templates and how to reach out. And then most reps, they get to the end of those 2 weeks and they're expected to just go start booking meetings. Sometimes that works, sometimes, well, from my experience, it doesn't. And then you have leaders scratching their heads thinking, well, we've given them everything, we've put them in front of enablement, what's going on? And it was kind of happening with this person as well. So I kind of explained, I showed him an example of a 4-week onboarding that I've built as a manager and I've taken into companies that I've gone through. But week 1 is more about getting to know the company versus the product. So what I'd like to do with my reps is introduce them to the VP of sales, the head of marketing, the head of customer success. And the main point of those meetings is to understand, why does that business unit exist? Why does that department work? And what's the goal for them? And how do they work in tandem with the other departments? So, from a sales point of view, what are the revenue targets? How are the revenue numbers calculated? And how does that then come back down to the individual rep? And the meeting with marketing, what type of content do they produce? What case studies do they have? What events do they have? And how do they work with sales? And then customer success, You know, they're the people that are looking after their existing and top customers. So, you know, like what happens with onboarding? How do customers get measured? How do sales interact when it comes to upsells and cross-sells? And also with all of those leaders, like why did they join the company? You know, what do they love about the business? What lessons have they learned? So this is more about getting to know the company versus just the product. And then when we roll into week 2, this is kind of now understanding the SDR process. So how do we use the sales tools? And also, you know, what are our metrics? What are our KPIs? How do we get measured as SDRs? And I think at this point it's always good to kind of set the expectation that when you're working in sales, it's a performance-based role based on KPIs and metrics. And, you know, if performance isn't there once onboarding's all done and you're working your day to day, then that can, you know, have a problem, and that's a concern. So letting the reps know, like, look, this is a KPI driven role, and if performance isn't there, then, you know, that could result in having to have a conversation. And then week 3 is more about actually getting into the prospecting, so using the tools, adding leads to sequences, cadences, having cold calling training, talking about time management. And then by week 4, that's typically when you're going to produce your first result, like a booked meeting or an opportunity. And, you know, from the 5 to 9, 10 different startups that I've worked in or helped, you know, set up their SDR function, this works better, and most reps, you know, then gain results. And then kind of what I was saying to this BDR manager was, like, if you think about the first 3 months of the rep, so it's a quarter. Month 1, they're trying to absorb as much knowledge as they can, and it's really overwhelming. Month 2, they start putting into action what they've learned, and here they make a lot of mistakes. You know, things don't work, and that's cool because it's through failures that you learn to then get your successes. And then it's typically by month 3 that something clicks and they get it, and that's when they come into their own. So that was the first part we're talking about, is, you know, from the beginning, from the onboarding, how it should go about. And then we came into like the regular syncs that he has with his team during the week. So the example that I shared was when I was an SDR manager, I typically have 3 main touch points through the week with my reps. But understanding as a manager, I don't want to get in their way, and I don't really want to be a micromanager. And through those 4 weeks of onboarding, I'm teaching them to become self-sufficient, you know, becoming mini CEOs for their own territory. So on a Monday, it would be like a 25-minute sync, and the objective of that meeting, and that's the key bit, there is an objective to all of the points of those syncs. So the objective is to set the tone of the week, to motivate and inspire. So within that, it's about connecting as a team. How was everybody's weekend? And okay, here's our operating rhythm. This is what we need to be doing on a daily basis. And, you know, here's what we're doing with marketing. Here's some campaigns. This was some success from last week. This is how this rep hit that and, you know, won that meeting. And, you know, really inspire them to think about their strategy for the week. And, you know, let them go do what they need to do with their AEs and, you know, setting up their leads and sequences and target accounts. And then what we'd have is like a daily stand-up. Now, this daily stand-up would only be about 10 minutes because, again, I don't want to get in the way of my reps and their work. And with the daily stand-up is just to have a pulse on how is everybody doing, and is everybody okay, and does anybody need any help. So I used to have this thing called the YFB. So the Y would stand for what did you accomplish yesterday? The F would be what are you focusing on today? And the B would be the blockers. Is there anything blocking you to your road of success? So a blocker could be, you know, the dialer's not working, or their sequence isn't producing the results, or perhaps, you know, they can't get access to LinkedIn Sales Nav. And with those blockers, as a manager, my job would be to take those blockers and get them fixed so they could continue. And at the end of the week, we have our wrap-up. So the wrap-up is, you know, to debrief on what's happened in that week. And again, this is only a 25-minute meeting. So we'd go into, you know, what were the results, what were the KPIs, how many meetings did we book, how much pipeline did we generate. And then also we'd use this element to spotlight on an individual rep. So for example, let's just say Jack booked 15 meetings that week somehow. I would ask Jack to have maybe 1 or 2 slides of, okay, how did he accomplish that? What were the results and what were the learnings? Because again, with reps, rather than a manager telling them what to do and, you know, I was once a rep and this is how I did it, you get the internal buy-in from their peers seeing how their peers are winning. So, you know, these 2 elements with this BDR manager was the onboarding and then how you sync with your team. But when I connected with this gentleman, you know, a month later, he kind of just said, hey Neil, thanks again for your time. Honestly needed to speak to somebody like you. Already have designed a new weekly structure for my team and looking forward to what's come. So when we had the catch-up call this week, He just said that meeting revolutionized like his mind and the way that he's working with the team, and they finished the month strong, the strongest result that they had in the last 9 months, and they're a month away from finishing their quarter as the strongest quarter since 2022. And I was like, whoa, like, congrats, dude. And the interesting thing that this gentleman said when we came to the end of the second coaching call was, do you know what, sales coaching, I was really skeptical. He's skeptical, like, within, like, he's always wanted to have a sales coach, but he was skeptical about it. And he said, similar to like a therapist, you know, is it going to work? But he says sometimes when you find that therapist or that coach and it clicks, and then you're like, right, we're going to be having more conversations. So that was really fulfilling, like, for me. So shouts out to that BDR manager, and I'm looking forward to having our next catch up next month. Another one was, I had a really cool rep who, you know, found me on LinkedIn. He's liking my content, and we're sliding into the DMs and we're chatting, and we're having like a really cool like back and forth. He like wants to get to know me. He sees that I'm into my fitness. He's then relaying some stuff, and then he hit me up with somebody else's podcast, and he said, oh, have you listened to this podcast? And I just said, no, I haven't. And he said, oh, definitely recommend giving it a listen. And I was being honest with him, saying like, look, a lot of people send me stuff and I can't always review everything. But I said, what would be really helpful is if you can tell me the segments or the timestamps of the bit you really want me to listen to. Because that way, rather than listening to, and I know this is kind of put against myself, but rather than listening to a full 45-minute podcast, if there was something that really inspired him, then just let me know that, you know, skip into, you know, 10 minutes, 53 seconds in, that's the really cool bit. And the reason why I say this is sometimes what I say to reps and SDRs that are sending contents or links in their emails, like with case studies. Most of your prospects probably don't want to read a 5 to 10 page case study or white paper, or perhaps they don't want to watch a 25-minute webinar video fully. Like, nobody really wants to spend too much time doing that. But if you can tell your prospect in brackets, if you skip to page 3, paragraph 5, that's the secret sauce. Or if you skip to, you know, 8 minutes, 32 seconds in, that was the strategy that got that person to win and overcome the challenges. People are probably going to be more likely to read or watch that, and then they can take, you know, the decision if they want to read or watch the rest of it, right? Another one that I really want to talk about, because I think this is really important for people to know, especially when you start becoming an online presence or you start posting on LinkedIn. So I had one individual, I won't put that person's name, but they recently put out a LinkedIn post that went viral, and it got a lot of attention. Like, I think, you know, like probably around just under 1 million impressions, right? That's crazy. I've never done that, and salute to that person for doing it. And I could see all the comments on LinkedIn going to it, and even I gave it a like and just like congratulated him. But then a few days later, I got a LinkedIn DM asking for a call, like a coaching call, like he was really desperate to have a call. Unfortunately, I just couldn't do it right there and then, so I gave him the booking link and said book it in as soon as possible. But when connecting with this individual, he came into it with a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry. And the story goes that I put out this post on LinkedIn, it got a lot of attention, and his DMs were just flooded with reps asking him how did he do it, what should they be doing, asking him for advice. And he was kind of like, I don't know. And he said, you know, people are asking for meetings and booking his and wanting to have time with him. It drew his anxiety through the roof. And he kind of then asked, like, should he start changing up his LinkedIn profile? How can he continue? And then ultimately, how the hell is this consistent? And his question to me was like, what should I change, or should I change? And obviously I had my own thoughts on it, but I pushed it back on him and I just said, what do you think? Then he paused and he thought about it, and he's saying, well, there's two sides to my mind. One is, you know, optimize my LinkedIn, try to create another post like this, and, you know, try to find ways. And then the other side of his brain was saying, no, just, you know, he was that person before the post, he should just continue as is. And I just said, yeah, I agree, you know. And so you know, we kind of concluded the conversation, and I gave him my advice of, you know, don't change for anyone. Don't do it just because you feel that you have to fit a personality to please other people. And the analogy that I gave him was from my time working in music and knowing some famous people that get a lot of attention. Like, a lot of people want to have fame or become LinkedIn famous and get the likes, but it brings a lot of baggage with it. Because the moment you put yourself outside, online, posting as a public personality, you then become public property. And, what things I don't watch, but, TV shows like Love Island, right? Really don't watch that show. But where you've seen people come on, they love the glamorous side of it, makeup's all on, their hair's all done, they're wearing the best clothes. And then when they go to social media, you get people that don't even know them commenting, making horrible comments, being really nasty. And it's impacted their mental health to the point of suicide. Some people have ended their life because they just can't take it. And there is that advice given to a lot of celebrities of never read the comments. And again, not saying that I'm famous, but I've worked in music where I noticed early on in my music days where being a microphone MC, rapper in a club or stuff, the moment you step up on a stage, people would grab you or then demand to have a picture with you or tell you that they want this song or then say that they want to battle with you on there. And then posting stuff online, people will make comments about your music and then say, oh, when's your next track coming out? Or, oh, maybe you should have done this. So literally when you become public, you become public property. So with this individual, he was feeling that sort of vibe, right? And it was scary for him. And it made me really worry about the people that post on LinkedIn that sometimes when you want the fame, there's a price to pay with it as well. So, as I advise this young guy, just keep doing you. Don't worry about stuff. And then I shared with him a podcast episode that I did with Matthias Sharper from SDRs of Germany. And I said, she was an SDR a couple of years back. She's now a CEO and co-founder for a 2 million ARR business. And with Matthias, she said, being authentic on LinkedIn, she said, Neil, I don't post every day. I maybe post twice a week. Perhaps when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, I think to myself, what's happened this week? Did I close a deal, etc. And then maybe I write a LinkedIn post, but I don't put pressure on myself, and I use LinkedIn as my personal diary. And I just said, look, somebody who's up there doing the thing, but how calm she is about it, that's kind of the way we do it. And I said, with myself posting on LinkedIn, I get a lot of demand from people. And I said, ultimately, nobody owns you. You don't owe anybody anything. And sometimes when you are a public personality, you have to have your boundaries, I'll have people saying, can we jump on a call? Hey Neil, I've got this, can I have a check of it? And I'll be honest with them and just say, I can't. Some people I can, some people I can't. But when it gets to a certain point of the day, I switch off. And the other thing that I heard about this gentleman was he said, normally, Neil, I don't go onto LinkedIn on the weekends, but I found myself answering stuff when I was supposed to be just chilling out. And it affected him so much that, he just had to put his phone down, he had to go check with his friends, and he had to kind of decompress, but he didn't want to talk to anyone, he just wanted to be in a room with other people. So be very mindful that if you want something, really understand what you're putting yourself in, especially when you want to put yourself public, right? Because, again, you don't owe anything to anyone, you're just putting out your opinion. But ask yourself, why are you doing this? Is it for the likes? Because if you want to get to a certain point, and you've probably seen this online with a lot of celebrities, and I said to this gentleman, if you look at celebrities like Tobey Maguire or Russell Crowe, they really don't like talking to people when they're out. But because they've been on a film, people think that they're that person in real life. And when they don't get the response or they don't get the love back or they can't get a picture with them, they're like, that person's an a-hole. No, some people have online personalities and that's what they put on camera. But off camera in their personal life, they may be very introverted and not want to talk. And the one thing that I try to do, coming online, doing stuff like this, I try to be the same person that I am online, offline. And I do get feedback from people saying you're still that same guy, and they've met people that, they've seen their online content, they're a big fan, but when they've met that person, they're not the person they thought they were. And I actually experienced this once in my music career, bringing this back to, there was a famous, in my scene, a famous, musician, big fan of their content, and I was booked to go play with them. And one of my mentors at the time said, be mindful of that person. right, Neil, I'd recommend not doing it. And being a young musician back then, I looked at my mentor like, are you mad? Like, come on, this is that person. Like, why are you hating? But cut long story short, went for that booking. That person was really rude to me, and really put a bad taste in my mouth. That when I came back to my mentor, I was like, you're right. So to kind of wrap this up, what I'm saying is, sometimes you may be a fan of somebody's content, but you may not be a fan of the artist, right? And some people are like that. Bernie, lovely to see you. Give you a little bit of a wave. So yeah, be mindful of, being online and people trying to have access to you. Another DM that I had working with another rep who was going through a tough time in their startup. The startup has gone through like an acquisition, a merger, people are leaving, and this person's really wanting to try and see it out because they've put a lot of time and effort into it. But as the weeks have gone on, then we're having catch-ups. I'm just seeing this person become more and more and more disheartened and questioning, and it was a question that I've asked myself many times is, should I be in sales? Like, perhaps I could just throw in the towel for sales and then go work in something else. And I said to this person, bro, I've been there. I've thought that multiple times over the last 15 years. I've even thought to myself, maybe just go get a standard 9 to 5, working for local government, becoming a teacher, becoming a delivery driver or stuff like these thoughts have come. And I said, try not to make a decision based on the current circumstance, And I kind of asked this person, like, what is it that you want? What is your why? What is it that you'd look to achieve? And ultimately they were saying that they wanted to get into an account executive position. That's the only thing that they want. And I've been there. And I kind of tried to say to this person, like, look, sometimes what happens is we go from point A to point B and we're so intent on getting on point B. But sometimes when we get to point B, we then say, then what? And I'm like, you need to think about long term as well. So if you wanted to become the account executive, what is it about being the AE? And it's the money, it's doing the demos, they think they're going to be a killer AE. And I said, okay, you could potentially be, but let's say that you get into that AE position, account executive, like closing sales, and it isn't all cracked up what it's supposed to be. So really explore where you want to go with that and why you want to do it. So for me, my why of launching my business is because I want to help as many people as I can. But at one point, I do want to retire so that I can just spend as much time with my son and we can have the life and go wherever in the world and stuff. That's my why I'm doing a business. I don't foresee myself doing this forever because I want to live my life. But I said equally, I need to also want to be enjoying what I'm doing whilst that's happening. So it's that journey piece, right? So this individual, they had to think about it and they're now looking at other options, and I'm going to be helping them with looking for those options as well. What else is sliding into the DMs? This other one. So I had a lovely lady who came onto my podcast yesterday and we did the recording. And what I really loved about this person was they messaged me a day before to say they're looking forward to the podcast. They also asked, to summarize the discussion we had like a month ago about preparing for it and the topics she wanted to discuss. And I love it when people take the effort to prep for something that I do regularly every Friday. I'm just used to, I can just jump into a podcast and I can just start recording because I've been doing it for so long. But for this person, it was their first time. And I was just kind of saying to them, like, you've got it all to a T, no worries. I said, as long as you bring yourself, you're on time. And if you want those topics as the topics you want to discuss in the podcast, that's all you need. I will look after the rest. Because I think coming into the actual podcast itself, I always want it to be a great experience for them, because I've been on other podcasts where it's not been a great experience and it's just rock up, let's talk about this, dive in, and here's... Nah. Because the thing that I say to people that come to my podcast is, I want you to feel comfortable and I don't want you to feel like this is a job interview. It's an informal chat between two people that are passionate about this topic. It's not trying to represent your company or their brand, it's the person. The reason why people love my podcast is because I'm more about the story and the people behind that job title and the role, how they got into it, how they navigate their career, because that's the bit that people can relate to more, right? So going into the actual podcast, this person was from Germany, and I noted at the beginning that with English was not their first language. And throughout it, they were pausing to try and think about how to construct a response to a question. So I noticed myself having to slow it down a little bit and not just spitting off and asking questions and everything. and taking a more relaxed approach. And as we got to the end of the podcast, she mentioned this. She said, English isn't my first language, but thank you so much for helping me get to my points. And it reminded me of, being an SDR where I was prospecting to Europe and speaking to a lot of people where English was not their first language. And what I had to say to her was, I really salute you for making the effort to, converse within English, especially if it isn't your first language. I really respect that. And at the end of it, she just said, this was so fun. She really enjoyed it. She felt that I made things really comfortable for her. And it's a freaking cool episode, and it'll be out in a couple of weeks, right? But yeah, I think the other thing we sometimes have to understand is when we're speaking internationally, understanding the nuances of different languages, how we speak to people, how we respect them, and not just expecting everybody to speak English just because we do, right? Because it's not that for some people. What else? And yeah, so after that, when I was in the call itself, I said to the lady, and I did a sales thing, I said, did you enjoy this experience? Yes. Is this something you would ever do again? Yes. Based on your experience, could you recommend anybody to come on the show and go through what you've gone through? And she said, 100%, there's one person I'm already thinking. And I said, okay, would you feel comfortable introducing us on a DM to bring that person on, and they'll go through the same introductory call, see if it's a fit for them, and then book a recording. And literally within like 10 minutes after our recording, I got the DM, and it's with somebody actually I've always wanted to bring on to the show, but I just didn't really know how to approach it. So remember to ask for the referral, because as they say, 92% of happy customers would be willing to give a referral, but only 11% of salespeople would ask for it. And she said, I like that technique. I'm definitely going to use that as an account executive. And the very last one, just off the back of that, was after the recording, I had an introductory call with somebody who's wanting to be a guest. And this guy was called Dietrich, and he's originally from Germany as well, but based out in Lisbon. And normally when I have an introductory call with somebody to come onto my podcast, it's a discovery call, and that's why it's called the SDR Disco Call. Discovery call? Get it? And I have a slide deck where I do a bit of discovery, and then I show them how the show works. And I've got this process down to a T. I've been doing it for 3 years, so it's pretty much I can do it with my eyes closed. But as we got to the end of that call and they committed to saying they wanted to come on board, they said they really liked this process. It was smooth. And as an account executive, he said this is something that could benefit him. So I said to him, if you want to steal this deck, I'll also send you the recording. Feel free to rip it apart and use it. Because I said, what I've learned in sales, I've applied my sales process learning to my podcast process. Because ultimately I just want people to be comfortable so that when they come to the recording, aka the demo, they really actually want to do this, and I'm not trying to pull them in as a bad sales rep. So looking forward to that one. And yeah, that's, with my podcast, it's everything I've learned from what I've done in sales, and then I apply it to the process, so it's transferable skills. But I think, the very last one, the one which made me so freaking happy. Yesterday, somebody from my music days watches my business Instagram and my personal Instagram. So they see the episodes and the clips that I put out about the show. And, truth be told, the reason that I'm doing the podcast is not only just to help SDRs that are coming into the industry to learn from other SDRs that have just come in, but it's to inspire my friends to get into tech sales because it's such a fucking cool job and cool industry. And this person sent me the DM, said, hey Neil, I've been watching your clips, really enjoying it, I love your content. Do you have any content if somebody's thinking about getting into tech sales? And I was like, bro, I've got you. And we exchanged a couple of voice notes, and this person has worked in a type of sales, not software sales, and they're feeling that they need to make a change in their life, and they're now looking at tech sales. And the advice that I gave to this person was, look, when you come into tech sales, it's one of the coolest professions to come in where you don't actually need to have technical knowledge. You don't need to know how the software or the APIs and everything works. And I just said to them, simply put, if you think something like Uber or Instagram, it's a piece of software. And you had a couple of founders that were working in a garage, and then they launched a company, got a bit of money, and then they got a sales team to promote that app. That's tech sales, right? And I said, the beginning is to come into that role as an SDR. And I said, I've met a lot of people that are maybe in their 30s, 40s, and they want to flip now into a new career and come to tech sales. So I said, here's a bunch of podcast episodes to go watch, have a read through it, and then you know, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'm happy to help, because as my point here is, I'm always happy to help for those that ask for that help. And I do have that content. I've been building it for the last 3 years, and I can share it. And these are the reasons why, not only just to post to get likes or engagement, it's to help people to find that content. So if somebody ever said to me, Neil, do you have something on cold calling? Yeah, here you go. Neil, do you have something on how to motivate a team? Yeah, here you go. Or, you know, how do I bring myself back out of a slump? Here you go. I've got it. All right. Always be recorded. Always be recorded. I like ABR. That's a new one. But yeah, that was the one that made me really happy. Somebody from my personal friend network, and following that DM, I then got a LinkedIn request from them, and I didn't even know they was on LinkedIn. So that's really cool. But yeah, so I think really cool week. A lot of insights. The main thing is how you talk to your people as a manager and how you structure your week is important to make sure that you can motivate them, lead them, but make them independent. When you become an online personality, remember that you become public property to an extent, but you must have your boundaries, and try not to worry about trying to please people or be something for people. Just be consistently you. And if you're wanting to get into tech sales, I have a podcast and a lot of content. So if you ever want any help to think about transitioning from one career and coming into tech sales, one of the best professions to get into. We've made it through this Instagram live and it hasn't rained. It's been a bit cold, but it's been all right. Thank you to Bernie and Chris, you've just joined in. If you want to watch back on the recording, dude, and join us on the next one. But yeah, that's me. So what I'm going to do with this content is, once it's recorded, I'm going to splice it up, repost it on different platforms. And again, if you ever have any questions wanting me to answer, please slide into my DMs and let me know. And I could potentially be doing another one of these next week, because I've got my son again. And next week, I'm actually watching him doing a performance. Hope everybody has a blessed weekend. And most importantly, happy selling. And thank you for joining me on this Saturday sliding into the DMs.